The air in the Maple Creek Town Hall was thick with the scent of pine needles and ambition. For Elara Vance, it was the most intoxicating perfume in the world. She stood in the center of the cavernous room, a clipboard held like a shield against her chest, her eyes scanning the space with a critical, yet fiercely loving gaze. Streamers of silver and gold were being draped from the high-timbered ceilings by a team of volunteers. A massive stage was being constructed at the far end, destined to host the Midnight Mavericks, the most sought-after party band in 3 counties. This wasn't just any New Year's Eve party, this was Maple Creek's Bicentennial Gala, and Elara was its architect. At 28, Elara had built her event planning business, Vance Victories, from the ground up. She was known for her impeccable taste, military precision, and a near-pathological need for perfection. This gala was her magnum opus, her ticket to finally expanding beyond the sleepy, tradition-bound town of Maple Creek. The mayor himself had entrusted her with the task, and the budget reflected the town's lofty expectations. "Bury the lights," she called out, her voice crisp and clear, cutting through the hum of activity. "We need to test the strobes against the glitter curtain. I want a cascade of light at the stroke of midnight, not a flicker." Barry, a young man with a headset too large for his head, nodded frantically and scurried off. Elara allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Everything was on schedule. The ice sculptures were being delivered at 6, the champagne was chilling in industrial-sized refrigerators, and the fireworks display was programmed to the second. It was going to be flawless, a spectacle that would be talked about for decades. The heavy oak doors of the hall creaked open, letting in a blast of frigid December air, and a sliver of the late afternoon light. A man stood silhouetted in the doorway. He wasn't tall, but he carried a presence that seemed to fill the space. He wore a worn brown leather jacket, and his face was a roadmap of lines carved by years and weather. In his hands, he held not a tool or a decoration, but a small, curiously carved wooden goat, painted a faded, chipped cobalt blue. Elara's smile tightened. She knew him, as every person in Maple Creek knew him. Elias Thorne, the town's unofficial historian, keeper of its oddities, and in Elara's private opinion, its most stubborn relic. "Elias," she said, her tone carefully neutral. "To what do we owe the pleasure? If you're here to volunteer, we could use a hand with the chairs." Elias's eyes, a pale, piercing blue that seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed composure, swept across the hall. They lingered on the modern LED screens, the sleek chrome bar, the absence of anything that wasn't shiny and new. A frown settled on his face. "No, Miss Vance," he said, his voice a low rumble, like stones shifting deep underground. "I'm not here for the chairs. I'm here about the goat." Elara blinked. The goat. He stepped fully into the hall, his boots echoing on the polished floor. He held up the small wooden figurine. The Cobalt Goat. It's part of the midnight chime. A cold dread, entirely separate from the winter chill, trickled down Elara's spine. She had heard whispers of this, of course. A silly little superstition, something about a goat and a bell. She had dismissed it as quaint local color, irrelevant to her sophisticated, modern gala. "Elias, I'm sure it's a charming tradition," she began, her voice laced with a placating tone she used for difficult clients. "But as you can see, we have a very tight, very specific schedule for the midnight countdown. The bandleader, the mayor, and I have it all timed to the millisecond." "It's not a suggestion, Miss Vance," Elias said, his gaze unwavering. "It's a tradition. One that's been upheld in Maple Creek since its founding, 200 years ago tonight. At the stroke of midnight, as the new year begins, the Cobalt Goat must be presented to the crowd, and the old town bell must be rung. It's for luck. For the town's prosperity." Elara felt a flush of irritation. This was precisely the kind of small-town sentimentality that held people back. Luck. They had a budget of $75,000. They didn't need luck. "With all due respect, Elias, our prosperity this year is coming from a sold-out gala, a feature in the statewide events magazine, and a fireworks display that will break the internet. I don't think a wooden goat is going to make or break our annual yield." She forced a laugh, but it died in the air between them. Elias's expression didn't change. He looked at her not with anger, but with a profound, weary sadness. It's not about yield, girl. It's about heart. The founders of this town, the thorn among them, nearly starved that first winter. They had nothing but a stubborn goat that led them to a hidden berry patch that saved them. This, he said, lifting the figurine, is a reminder of resilience, of community. It's our story. And it's a wonderful story, Elara conceded, her patience wearing thin. Perhaps we can have you tell it during the cocktail hour? But at midnight, we have a laser light show synchronized to the Auld Lang Syne finale. There's simply no room in the timeline for a goat presentation. There must be, Elias stated, his voice final. Or you'll have no cooperation from the old families. You'll have no bell ringer. And you'll have broken a chain that has lasted 2 centuries. He turned and walked out, leaving Elara standing in the middle of her perfect, half-finished kingdom, the ghost of the Cobalt Goat hanging between her and her flawless vision. The confrontation with Elias Thorne festered in Elara's mind like a splinter. She tried to dismiss it, to bury herself in the comforting chaos of spreadsheets and seating charts. But the town, she quickly discovered, had a long memory. Her first clue came when she went to confirm the bell ringing with Old Man Hemlock, the town's nonagenarian clockkeeper, and the designated bell ringer for the past 50 years. He lived in a small cottage that smelled of oil and peppermints, surrounded by the gentle, incessant ticking of 100 clocks. "Ah, the Vance girl," he said, not looking up from the intricate guts of a grandfather clock. "Elias said you might be by." "I'm here to confirm the bell ringing at midnight, Mr. Hemlock," Elara said, her voice bright and professional. Hemlock wiped a gear with a delicate cloth. "Can't do it without the goat, you know. The bell and the goat, they're a pair. Like salt and pepper." Elara's smile felt brittle. "Mr. Hemlock, the bell ringing is a separate, auditory cue for our fireworks launch. It's a technical requirement. The goat is a separate folkloric element. They don't need to be connected." The old man finally looked at her, his eyes magnified behind thick spectacles. "They've always been connected. Since before your grandfather's grandfather was a twinkle in his daddy's eye. No gout, no time. That's the way of it." Frustration bubbled in Elara's chest. She encountered similar resistance all over town. The woman providing the vintage linens happened to mention her great-grandmother had woven a special blanket for the goat's pedestal. The baker creating the massive Bicentennial cake subtly inquired about incorporating a small blue goat motif into the icing. Each interaction was a gentle, yet firm, reminder of the tradition she was so determined to ignore. It was at the Steaming Mug, the town's only coffee shop, that she found an unlikely confidant. Ben Carter, the owner, was a transplant from the city who had fallen in love with Maple Creek's charm. He was around her age, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor that was the antithesis of her own frenetic energy. "Sounds like you've stumbled into the town's central nervous system," Ben said, sliding a latte with a perfect rosetta across the counter to her. "The Cobalt Goat isn't just a story, Elara. It's the story." "But it's so unsophisticated," Elara sighed, slumping onto a stool. "This gala is supposed to put Maple Creek on the map. How can we attract new businesses, new people, if our centerpiece is a faded wooden toy? Maybe the people you want to attract are the ones who would appreciate a town with a soul," Ben suggested gently. "Elias isn't trying to sabotage you. He's just the guardian of that soul. He's seen a lot of changes, not all of them good. The goat is a constant." Elara looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time. He wasn't handsome in a sharp city way, but there was a warmth and stability to him that was appealing. "My entire career is riding on this being perfect, Ben. A seamless, professional, breathtaking event. There's no cell in my Gantt chart for quaint superstition." Ben smiled. Sometimes the most perfect plans need a little imperfection to make them memorable. Later that evening, driven by a mix of curiosity and stubbornness, Elara found herself in the town's small historical society museum. It was a dusty, quiet place, but in a glass case, she found what she was looking for. There was the Cobalt Goat, or at least an older version of it. The placard told the story Elias had recounted, but with more detail. The winter of 1824 had been brutal. The founding families, led by a man named Elias Thorne, were on the verge of giving up. Their last goat, a stubborn blue-eyed nanny, had broken her tether and wandered off. In desperation, Alistair followed her tracks through a blizzard and found her, not lost, but standing guard over a cave full of edible fungi and winter berries that saved the settlement. The goat became a legend. The first wooden carving was made that very New Year's Eve, and it was vowed that the town would always remember the creature that, through its own stubborn will, had ensured their survival. Elara stared at the faded paint, the simple, earnest craftsmanship. For a moment, she felt a pang of something, not understanding, but a flicker of respect for the weight of the story. But then her phone buzzed. It was a text from the pyrotechnics team, confirming the final synchronization sequence. The moment passed. It was a nice story, but it was just that, a story. Her reality was light shows and champagne toasts. She couldn't risk her perfect night on a 2-century-old folktale. New Year's Eve dawned clear and bitterly cold. The sky was a hard, brilliant blue, promising a perfect canvas for the night's fireworks. Elara was at the town hall by 5 a.m., a whirlwind of focused energy. By noon, the ice sculptures, glittering renditions of the town's founding landmarks, were in place. By 3, the tables were set with crisp white linens and centerpieces of white roses and silver birch. By 6, the band was doing their sound check, the powerful chords of their music vibrating through the floorboards. It was beautiful. It was perfect. And Elara felt a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach with every passing hour. Elias Thorne had not returned. She had half expected him to stage a sit-in, to show up with a petition signed by all the old families. His absence was somehow more disconcerting. It felt like the calm before a storm she couldn't predict. The guests began to arrive at 8, swaddled in furs and fine wool, their laughter and chatter filling the hall with a vibrant, celebratory energy. Elara moved through the crowd, a fixed smile on her face, directing waitstaff, checking in with the bartenders, her headset buzzing with a dozen minor crises she solved with cool efficiency. She saw the mayor beaming, shaking hands, clearly thrilled with the spectacle. This was everything she had promised. And yet, her eyes kept drifting to the old clock tower, visible through the large arched windows. Its face was illuminated, the hands creeping inexorably towards midnight. At 11:30 p.m., the mood in the hall was electric. The Midnight Mavericks were playing a pulsing, infectious medley of hits, and the dance floor was packed. Elara took her position at the main control station, a sleek tablet in her hand. This was it. The final countdown. Audio check, she said into her headset. Lights check. Pyro standing by. Then she saw him. Elias Thorne stood at the entrance to the hall. He wasn't dressed for a party. He still wore his leather jacket, and he held the Cobalt Goat in one hand. He didn't try to push his way in. He simply stood there, a silent, immovable monument to the past, his eyes locked on Elara from across the room. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was her moment of truth. She could stick to the plan, give the signal, and unleash the dazzling, modern spectacle she had painstakingly built. Or she could capitulate to this old man and his superstition. Her finger hovered over the initiate sequence button on her tablet. The bandleader caught her eye, giving her a thumbs up. The mayor was moving towards the stage, ready for his countdown speech. She looked at Elias. He looked old and tired and utterly alone, a single, stubborn rock in the river of her progress. And in that moment, Ben's words echoed in her mind. He's the guardian of that soul. Elara? We're at T-minus 60 seconds to mayor's speech. Barry's voice crackled in her ear. She made a decision. Abort the mayor's speech, she said into her headset, her voice surprisingly steady. Abort. Barry's voice was a squeak of disbelief. Abort. Give me the main microphone. Now. A wave of confusion rippled through her team, but a moment later, the music faded, and the house lights came up slightly. A spotlight swung, not towards the mayor, but onto Elara. She walked to the center of the stage, her legs feeling like jelly, the tablet forgotten in her hand. The crowd looked at her, curious. She saw the mayor's confused frown. She saw Ben near the back watching her intently. "Good evening, Maple Creek," she began, her voice amplified through the hall. "Tonight, we celebrate 200 years. 200 years of community, of resilience, of stories." She took a deep breath. "I came here to give you a perfect party. And I thought perfection was about flawless execution, about the latest technology, about impressing the world. But I was reminded that some things are more important than perfection." She looked directly at Elias. "Some traditions are the glue that holds a place together. They remind us of who we are, and where we came from. And tonight, on our bicentennial, it would be a greater imperfection to break that chain than to have a laser show that's 5 seconds off." She gestured towards the door. "Elias Thorne, would you please come forward?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Elias, for the first time that evening, looked surprised. He hesitated for a moment, then straightened his shoulders and walked through the parted crowd, the Cobalt Goat held before him like a talisman. As he reached the stage, Elara spoke again, her voice softer. "Elias has something to share with us. A story and a tradition that belongs to all of you." She stepped back, yielding the stage. The hall was utterly silent. Elias looked out at the sea of faces, young and old. He cleared his throat, and when he spoke, his voice, unamplified, carried to every corner of the room. "This," he said, holding up the goat, "is not just a piece of wood. This is a promise made by Elias Thorne to a stubborn goat, and to this town, that we would never forget how we survived, that we would never forget that sometimes, salvation comes from the most unexpected places." He told the story again, but this time in the hushed hall, with the weight of 2 centuries behind it. It wasn't a quaint folktale. It was an epic. It was their genesis. As he finished, the clock on the tower began to chime midnight. Bong. The crowd instinctively began to count. 10, 9, 8. Elias held the goat high for all to see. 7, 6, 5. Elara, standing beside him, felt a strange thrill, a connection to something larger than herself. 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. As the final chime faded, Elias lowered the goat, and from the clock tower, a deep, resonant bell began to ring out. Not the automated chime for the fireworks, but the old, manual peal of the town bell, rung by Old Man Hemlock. It was a sound that vibrated in the bones, a sound of history. And then, something magical happened. Elara gave the signal, and her fireworks erupted into the sky. But they were no longer just a technical display. They were a celebration of the story. Gold and silver bursts for the founding, a cascade of blue in honor of the goat, a final thunderous volley of red and white that painted the night in the town's colors. It was more beautiful than she had ever imagined. The crowd erupted in cheers, but it was a different kind of cheer than she had anticipated. It was deeper, more heartfelt. People weren't just celebrating a new year. They were celebrating themselves. Elias turned to her. The sternness had melted from his face, replaced by a look of profound gratitude. "Thank you, Miss Vance," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "You gave us back our heart tonight." Elara simply nodded, a lump in her throat. She looked out at the joyful, celebrating town and knew, with absolute certainty, that she had never created anything more perfect in her entire life. The week after the gala was a whirlwind of a different kind. The feature in statewide events magazine came out, but it wasn't the pyrotechnics or the ice sculptures that were the focus. The headline read, "Maple Creek's Bicentennial, where modern glamour meets timeless tradition." The article spent 3 paragraphs on the story of the Cobalt Goat and Elara's last-minute decision to honor it, praising her for her emotional intelligence and deep respect for community narrative. Her phone rang off the hook. But it wasn't just clients wanting lavish parties. It was towns from all over the state, asking if she could help them uncover and celebrate their unique traditions. Vance Victories had a new, unexpected, and deeply satisfying niche. On a crisp, bright morning in early January, she found herself walking up the path to Elias Thorne's small, rustic cabin on the edge of the woods. He was sitting on his porch, whittling a new piece of wood, the Cobalt Goat sitting on the railing beside him, soaking up the sun. "Elias," she called out. He looked up, and to her astonishment he smiled. It transformed his entire face. "Elara, come to check on your co-conspirator." She laughed, climbing the steps. "Something like that." She looked at the goat. "It looks good out here in the light." "It belongs in the light," he said. "Not locked away in a case, or forgotten in an old man's memory." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Seat." She sat, the winter sun warm on her face. "I wanted to thank you," she said. "You were right. About all of it." "You weren't wrong either," he replied, surprising her. "The town needed that party. It needed the glamour, the excitement. You gave us a look forward, just as I was trying to make us look back. A place needs both to thrive." They sat in a comfortable silence for a few moments, watching a cardinal flit between the bare branches of a maple tree. "I was thinking," Elara began, a new idea having taken root in her mind over the past few days. "The Historical Society building is looking a little tired. What if we organized a proper fundraiser? A spring renewal festival? We could have it right here in the town square. We could tell the story of the goat properly, maybe even have a local artist create replicas for the children. We could use the funds to restore the museum and digitize the archives." Elias stopped his whittling and looked at her, his blue eyes shining. "You do that." "It's my town too, Elias," she said softly. "I think I just needed a stubborn old man and a blue goat to help me remember that." He chuckled, a rich, genuine sound. "Well then, Miss Vance, it seems we make a good team." Later, as she walked back into town, her steps felt lighter than they had in years. She stopped by the steaming mug. Ben was behind the counter, wiping it down. "I heard about the spring renewal idea," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Sounds like the work of a true Maple Creek local." Elara smiled, a real unforced, effortless smile. "It's a start," she said. "I have a lot to learn, but I have good teachers." She ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching the people of Maple Creek go about their day. The town looked different to her now. The old buildings weren't just outdated structures. They were keepers of stories. The people weren't just obstacles to her plans. They were the living, breathing heart of the place. Her plans had changed. Her definition of success had been rewritten. And her heart, she realized, had finally found a home. The chime of the bell and the silent, steadfast gaze of the Cobalt Goat had ushered in more than just a new year. They had ushered in a new beginning for Elara Vance. One built not on perfection, but on belonging.